Hey all, welcome to the webinar. I think we've got some more people piling in here, so we'll give it just a second. Awesome, Deepthi, you guys hear me okay? Awesome. Cool. Well, we only have 30 minutes, so I don't want to wait too long. There might be some people coming in, and we'll let them roll in. My name is Chase Rigby. I head up product and design here at Aktify. I brought a couple of my product managers along, Deepthi Perry, if you want to wave, and Austin Adair, you're there too. I've also made sure that I've actually come into our Orange County office, so you shouldn't have any. I've got 3 kids under 5 at home, so came to the office to make sure we don't get Zoom bombed. We shouldn't have any disruption here. So we'll make sure that we jump into the content. We wanted to have a webinar with a lot of our customers, even prospective customers that are coming here, to understand how the landscape and industry is evolving around compliance, and how Aktify, what we're trying to do is really make sure that we can get all of our customers compliant and understand these rules, understand the regulations to ensure deliverability, and make sure that we can connect you and your customers through our conversational intelligence, which we'll jump into here soon. Brendan, I think you're the one driving the deck. If you want to jump to the next slide for me. So if you're new to Aktify, if you haven't been a customer of ours, just giving you a quick overview of what we do and how we use both data science and machine learning to be able to host conversations on your behalf with your customers on their terms and on their turf. How we do this is through training an agent, through data modeling, being able to have those conversations, understanding what questions are being asked, what concerns might come up, and being able to have those conversations on the fly at scale, even while you're sleeping. At any given point in time, we have over 42,000 conversations happening. And so we're able to connect you with your customers and do the heavy lifting for you. We're really excited to talk a little bit more about compliance and what this means to your business, how we can make sure that we ensure those deliverability. If there's any questions though through the webinar, please put them in the chat. We'll either try to answer them live, or if we need to follow up with you after, let's do that too. Next slide. So the impetus of this meeting and presentation is because the industry is changing. The regulations underneath it are changing, and the consumer behavior is requiring that. So if you think about 20 years ago, there was no texting. Call ID was rare, and it was a bunch of call centers that were calling during dinner time, and you pick up the phone and say, "No thanks, stop calling." That was the teleprompter or the telesales that was happening. Today, because of that, consumer behavior has shifted so much in that, especially the rising generation, they prefer text message. That's the first point of contact in which they want to talk to a brand. They don't want to pick up unrecognized phone numbers. And they're doing these conversations across multiple channels, not just even text, but through web chat, through Instagram, through Twitter, just other internet channels. And so with those shifts has come new regulation from both the phone carriers, from both the government, and also through different CPaaS platforms that we use to be able to deliver those messages. So in terms of understanding this landscape, where Aktify works is between your business and those platforms and carriers to ultimately deliver those messages to the consumer. One thing to know is that while voice, meaning calling, is regulated by the FCC and TCPA, there's been some new developments on the texting side of things that carriers are actually self-regulating through what's now called A2P 10DLC. And that's to ensure that ultimately the end goal is that carriers are not perpetuating spam problem or even abusive behavior or predatory behavior. And so we're going to go over today is to ensure your deliverability, to ensure that we don't enable spam, and that your customers and your consumers ultimately have the best experience with your brand. Keep in mind that your brand and your positioning and your brand equity is super important. And so by complying with this and making sure that you are compliant and that your consumers opt into those things, you're ensuring that your brand is going to have good brand visibility. It's not going to be associated with any sort of spam or unwanted perception that you might not want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick it over to Austin, who's going to walk us through what are those new regulations and how can Aktify help you navigate some of that landscape.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chase. Let's jump in and talk about the regulations that the carriers have put in place. These are vital to know and make sure that you're complying with. So once your campaign goes live through Aktify, the carriers and many CPaaS companies will ensure that we are running clean traffic by monitoring the company's opt-out rate. For your reference, a healthy opt-out rate is anything below 3%. If a campaign is operating above 3%, it tells the carriers that we are reaching out to customers who don't really want to be contacted, and this could result in an investigation into your traffic. If this happens, the carriers will check to ensure that all customers have given your brand express written consent to contact them, that your product and services are within bounds, and that the customer has the option and knowledge to opt out at any time. It's important to note that we don't work for the carriers, we work for Aktify, but we want to really work with you guys and educate you so that you understand and know how to get ahead of the game so that all of your customers have positive interactions. So first and foremost, the carriers do not allow products in these categories to be promoted through automated text messaging. If you're in one of these industries, please reach out to us and we can help you navigate your options moving forward. So let's say that you are wondering, well, am I doing things that the carriers don't want? What are the repercussions? Typically, you're able to get away with non-compliance for a short period of time, but that is a short-term mindset because once they find out that you have been non-compliant, you may have longer lasting effects that may disable you from sending messages at all in the future. Here are a few of the potential penalties for failure to comply. So as you see, there's three main categories. There's content violations. Those do include the banned categories in the previous slide, along with phishing, spam, and shaft categories, along with program evasion, such as snowshoeing. Snowshoeing has been very common throughout the industry, and that's where companies like us or the other CPaaS providers were sending varying messages using different phone numbers in order to evade filtering, which is just automated filtering on text messages to ensure that spam wasn't getting through. They've gotten really good at catching these, and if you're caught doing that, you can incur a $1,000 fine. If you go through Aktify, we do not use snowshoeing, so that you won't have to worry about really incurring any of these types of fines. Along with snowshoeing, there's also gray routes. So this is instead of sending A2P traffic, which is essentially application to person or business messaging, if you send peer-to-peer messaging, which is what would happen if I were to text Chase, which is just peer-to-peer traffic, you can get a $10 fine per message sent. Aktify sends 20 million messages per year, so you can imagine that this would be a pretty hefty fine, and because of that, we ensure that all of our traffic is clean in our platform. I know the compliance isn't the most important thing or interesting, but if you have one takeaway from this presentation, please update your opt-in forms. The first one I want to cover is website compliance. So this is kind of the main action that we recommend you guys take. If you don't have anything further, if you update your website, you won't have to do any sort of double opt-ins. You won't have to do any additional work. It'll be kind of the easiest solution. Here's an example of what a compliant opt-in form looks like. So a compliant opt-in form will have these 7 things. Brenda, if you want to keep on this slide. And to the right is an example. If you guys were to just take a screenshot of that and then just add this language, your opt-in form would be in compliance and you really wouldn't have to worry about that. And this is going to be the main thing that carriers check if they were to investigate your account. It's how are customers opting in? Do they know that we're going to be messaging them for promotional messages, and are they okay with it? So if you are to kind of include this, you should be golden moving forward.
Real quick, I want to ask a question just to make sure that I understand this too for customers. On the right-hand side, we've got like a really, this is the perfect case scenario for opt-in. And can you speak towards the language and the checkbox? I feel like a lot of our, what we see out in the wild maybe doesn't have that language or a checkbox. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty much what the language down here is trying to get at is that customers are very aware that they're going to be messaged by that company. So you need to have your program name. So let's say that we're representing Aflac. We would say you agree to receive automated promotional messaging from Aflac. You also agree to the terms and service, which would link to Aflac's terms of service, and privacy policy, which would link to Aflac's privacy policy. This agreement isn't a condition of any purchase. So what they want to ensure is that this isn't a requirement in order for you to buy Aflac, that you're opting into promotional messaging. And then that they are aware that messaging frequency may vary, meaning that we power conversational AI. So the amount of messages that we send varies depending on how long that conversation goes. Along with that, the customer should be aware that message and data rates may apply. And they also need to know that they can end communication at any point in time by simply just telling us stop. So if you cover those main things, your opt-in form will be in compliance and you won't have any sort of issue with the carriers.
Gotcha. Austin, tell us, I don't think we have a slide for this, but maybe, I can come on video just to take a seat here. I'm wondering, can you speak just real quick, high level? We've had some customers move from outdated opt-in forms to updating them, something like this. From the experiments and the data that we see, what happens to your lead volumes, both quality and quantity, by implementing a form like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we ran a split test on a customer, and we had their old traffic and then new cleaner traffic. And what we've seen is that when they had customers that opted into an opt-in form that was more similar to this, where it's very clear what they wanted, the overall volume of leads that they gave us had decreased, which is what we expected. But the transfer rates, I think they more than quadrupled. So what they saw is that we had far fewer customers opt out, which is a sign of negative traffic, in transfer rates. So the percentage of people that actually we were able to connect to back to the business was astronomically higher. So it was just overall a better customer experience, and they were able to retain nearly all of the transfers that they would have had, all of the quality transfers that they would have had originally. A quality transfer being a long transfer, which is determined as being more than 5 minutes.
Gotcha. Okay, so that only helps like in terms of transfer rates, but also in terms of cost incurred. Like you want to put your money on the highest quality leads, so it seems to be in line with probably what our customers would want to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I know if they don't do this, it looks like some of the other if we don't have like, what do I do if I'm a customer, if I don't have a form or even the capability to update my form like this, if it's it lives with some other agency or webmaster or something, what do I do then?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So what we're able to do is to double opt in your leads. This is something that's been very common for emails or text messages outside the United States. So a few of our customers might already be pretty familiar with what double opt in is. But if you're not, it's essentially our very first message that we send to the customer is just asking them if they really want to receive promotional messaging about your product. And if the customers say yes, then we will be able to have a normal conversation with them. We're able to answer their questions and ultimately hopefully lead and drive them to purchase your product. If they don't, then that's okay. The conversation just kind of ends there. And we do our best to not have negative interactions with those customers that don't want your product or didn't realize that that's what the form that they were signing would have entailed. But let's say that you don't want to update your opt-in form and that double opt-in doesn't seem like the best route moving forward. Deepthi is going to come on and talk about a third option.
Thanks, Austin. So this webinar was to highlight the importance of updating your opt-in forms. And at Aktify, we really want to make sure that you receive high intent leads to ensure high close rates and while staying compliant with career regulations. And all the recommendations that Austin provided will definitely help with that. But in the meantime, we are also working on additional options to help you achieve this. So another option that is considered compliant in the eyes of careers is if the consumer initiates the SMS conversation. And this will imply legal consent to carry forward the conversation. We are currently working on developing this option for you, and we are looking to sign up any interested customers for a beta program on the text us option that you see on your screen. You can sign up for this on the form that you see. So that's go.aktify.com/beta compliance. You can sign up for this on the form, and our account executives will be in touch shortly. You will also receive an email with this link, and you can sign up for this through the form to express your interest. So thank you so much for your time, and I will hand this back to Chase.
Yeah, Deepthi, back to the last slide, just to try to explain if for whatever reason we can't update our opt-in form, or we can't make it compliant to what the carriers and ATP is looking for, this allows the customers to be able to, what we're testing here is basically like a phone number that is assigned to that brand or business. That would be, is this an evergreen phone number, and how does that work? And
absolutely. So
reach out.
So basically what we are looking to test out is we assign each company a phone number, and we put up a message on your website that says, hey, can you text us at this phone number if you have any questions about our product or service, or chat with our agent on this phone number. And the consumer initiates this conversation, which makes it compliant since they're opting into this conversation, and our agent takes on the conversation from there to continue this, and this solves all our problems with the CPaaS vendors and carriers.
Gotcha. So it changes the conversation from being us initiating the conversation on your behalf. Then it allows the consumer or your customer to be able to reach out directly, but still using that Aktify AI to host the conversation.
Absolutely, that is correct.
Gotcha. Okay, well I think what we want to try to do is any customers that are here that want to pilot this with us, go to that link, go to aktify.com/beta compliance to be able to sign up. We're actively testing this right now. I think there are a lot of things that we need to figure out in terms of what conversations come in proactively from your customers rather than us reactively reaching out or proactively reaching out on our standpoint. And I think there's a lot that we need to learn in terms of the data science and the conversation around it. So please, any sort of customers that can sign up that have interest in this, please do. That will help us be able to gather the data and build a better product for you and ultimately for your customers. So I think the takeaway here, maybe I'll just take us home if that's okay, Deepthi and Austin. I think the only question that we had in the chat is if we'd share this presentation, which I think we definitely can. We can post this. If there are any other questions, put them in the chat now. Oh, it looks like we've got a hand raised or something. I don't know, Brandon, how that works, but it just popped up on my screen. I think the takeaways from this should be.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hey, so I have a question. I'm sorry, I hopped on a couple minutes late here. My name's Matt. So I just started using Aktify about a week ago. Love it. Everything's been awesome so far. So thanks for that. But a lot of the data that we're using currently is older data that's coming from our call center. So they've communicated with us over the phone, and we have a click off opt-in through our CRM, right? So let's say, for example, we were doing a lot of retail work where we were communicating with people on retail locations. They've given us our information, right, as we're communicating with them in the retail locations. And that information comes into our company as opt-in, or vice versa, right? Someone calls us or we call them back, right? We're explaining to them over the phone, you know, do you consent to receiving marketing from us, et cetera, et cetera. And we click that off in our CRM. So a lot of the data that we have is just tens of thousands of leads, it falls under that, that in that area. So my question here is that, how compliant is that data if we're going to be sending out these text messages? And if an issue does arise, what am I actually on the hook for?
Yeah, I'll start and then kick it over to Austin in terms of compliance, that question. I think where we're seeing, when we get questions back from the carriers, they're asking for specific, they'll even get as granular as picking out 4 or 5 phone numbers and say, show me proof of the opt-in form and even a screenshot in the database with the timestamp that proves that that phone number opted in through this form. And then what does the form look like? In terms of IVR, in that it was done on a different type of surface, I think Austin, maybe that's where you can opine. And as long as we can document that, I feel like that should.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chase.
So if I had, so just to clarify, we had a retail partnership with BJ's Wholesale Club. So we were approaching the people as they were walking into the store. We were allowed to be there from BJ's, right? They allowed us to, you know, to communicate with their customers, and that's where a lot of these lead lists came from. So the data was quote unquote compliant because they asked for us to call, but there is no, it's not a web lead, right? So there's no opt-in form on that.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different references that we can send out after this along with the presentation. One of the really good ones is T-Mobile's, and they do a great job of outlining what compliant traffic looks like. And they definitely know that not everyone's going to opt in via web form. What the level of consent that we need in order to send promotional text messaging, which is where we reach out first, is express written consent. So when you're collecting these leads in person, if you're able to get them to sign any sort of like form in person, that's going to be the gold standard. That's what you're going to want. And then let's say that if a carrier did request this information, how did this lead? And they're going to ask for a phone number, opt in. What we would want is we'd want you to send over, either fax it or to take a screenshot of that form that they had signed in person and definitely date it. And we can, if we're able to provide that to the carrier, then it's going to be totally golden. You won't have any issues. They won't throttle or turn off your account. So
Okay.
Let me answer your question.
Yeah, that definitely did. So on the legal side, and I don't know if you guys covered this, right? So I messaged someone that we talked to in the BJ's Wholesale Club 5 years ago. The person gets pissed off because I text them now. What's the repercussion of that? Is this like a slap on the wrist, a $50 fine, or am I like wrapped up in some, you know, multi-tiered TCPA compliant thing where there's going to be some class action or some craziness going on?
If you're sending text messages through Aktify, we have relationships with some of the bigger CPaaS providers who a lot of them actually are in business with a lot of the carriers. If any of your traffic is having higher opt-out rates and maybe there's a non-compliance issue, we have deals in place where we'll be able to give you a 30-day warning to cease giving us those types of leads before any sort of fines would be handed out. So there'll be a grace period where we can kind of adjust and make sure that the traffic you're giving us is wanted before any sort of punitive punishments.
Yeah,
okay. And
so speak about the TCPA 90-day timeline and re-opt-in. Just to clarify, how aged of these leads could we actually talk to or speak to?
Yeah. So after it's near 90 days, I can double check and we can verify that and send you the actual documentation after this. But we would not want to reach out to someone 90 or 5 years or something. We wouldn't even want to reach out to someone 6 months per se, and just send them a cold promotional message because it's not in compliance and it's going to have negative reactions, and that's going to start to create a lot of carrier investigations into that type of traffic. So it's just going to cause a lot of headaches. And then that's where fines would probably most likely be handed out. So we can avoid that if you're able to give us real-time leads. So like, let's say that someone were to sign up in person on an opt-in form, and then you give us that data like that day or really close, as close as possible that day, and then we reach out to them, we're going to see the highest level of consumer engagement, and we're going to be the least likely to incur a carrier investigation if you give us that type of traffic.
I think what you're saying too, it's like instead of trying to play the quantity game, where a lot of like a lot of it is quantity because it's a numbers game in terms of getting people in the funnel and through the funnel. I think thinking through it as quality, that's really kind of what we're hinting on with the more fresh or the more recent that these people have put themselves on their lists, the more effective it's going to be, and ultimately the more cost effective it's going to be for you and for Aktify, because we're not going to have to deal or play, compliance games and, hey, we need screenshots of this and proof of opt-in. And so I think that's kind of where we're going is as marketers, as folks that are trying to get people through the funnel, play the quality game. And we can help you do that because we can have quality human-like conversations. But if the leads are so old that, they opted in through some event in person years ago, it's only going to come back to damage your brand in the A2P registry and put further communication through our platform at risk for your customers. So that's the only thing I would say to kind of cap off that question. But that was a great question, Matt.
Okay. Yeah, that's all very helpful. Thank you for that.
I don't know if there are any others, but I think that's kind of our recommendation. Again, Brendan, if you can go actually all the way back to the very first slide, the one where it's kind of talking about what Aktify does. And the one thing I wanted to end with here is if you think about that consumer journey of somebody that has found out about your product and they're interested in it, and you want them to either service that account or win that deal, close that account, we want to be able to have those conversations for you. And again, it's quality over quantity, because that's the way that we power conversations better than humanly possible. We want to be able to have these conversations at scale, but we want to be able to do it in a compliant and safe way, because ultimately that's going to be better for your brand and ensure deliverability. Without that, we can't power any conversations. And so we're big believers in that this regulation keeps consumers safe. We do not want to enable spam. We want to be able to actually have human-like conversations and connections with your customers, because we know that will propel your brand forward. It'll also be a better experience for the customer, and they'll be more likely to stick around and be your customer for a long time. So both your company and our company will both win in achieving that. If there are any other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. But I think with that, what we'll do is we'll sign off until the next time, and always feel free to reach out directly. We can have those conversations through your account executive, or we can also try to please give feedback so we can make these more conversant in the next round. So thanks all. Thanks, Brendan, for driving the deck and everything. We'll make sure we send out this presentation, and have a great day.